ladies and gentlemen, with no further ado, a round of applause for Sir Christopher Elisan.
Thank you. Nung una akong inimbitan ng ROOTCON, plano sana lahat ng salita ko. Sa harap niya ay tatagalugin ko talaga. Lahat Tagalog. Pero nung una akong pagpunta rito, nalaman ko na marami rin palang hindi nakakapagkana. So for today, since you guys are always here since time immemorial, I'm going to present this in English. So we only have one English speaker. Alright, before I begin, I would like to thank ROOTCON for inviting me to come here. It always gives me the opportunity to visit the Philippines. So I grew up in the Philippines, and I'm 100% pure Filipino, and going back here is always fun. So today I'm going to talk about demystifying malware attack. This was the presentation I presented this year in RSA last February. 80% of the people walked out during my presentation. I hope none of that will happen today. So before we begin, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Christopher Elisan. Currently, I'm the principal malware scientist at RSA. I also head their malware intelligence team. And before that, I was with Dambala. It's a local company in Atlanta founded by Georgia Tech. And before Dambala, I was with F-Secure. So they hired me to build and establish their Asia R&D located in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia. And before that, I was with Trend Micro. So Trend Micro is where I started my career. During that time, there were only 15 of us in Trend Micro, and everybody knows everybody. So when I say 15 employees, that includes HR, everybody, the security guards. So it was just a small company back then. And some of the people I worked with are here, and I'm really happy to see some of them today. So this was a long time ago, so I wouldn't say the year, but when I started in Trend Micro, I had long hair. I had hair up to here. Now I cannot even grow my hair anymore. And I have white hair now. And you can always contact me at Twitter, so if you have questions about my presentation or you disagree with anything about it, please feel free to give me feedback at my Twitter account. And so in the Philippines, college is already expensive, right? And in the US, it's really, really expensive. So if you guys have budget for books, please buy copies of my books. So I wrote 2 books, Malware Tips and Botnets. It went out 2012. The other one went out last year, 2015. And one is coming out November this year, Malware Tips. This one I co-authored with Michael Davis and Sean Bonner. So if you guys have budget for books, please feel free to get a copy. Next year, if I'm lucky enough to be invited back again in ROOTCON, I'll make sure I'll bring some of my books and give some of them away. But for this year, if you can buy one, please buy one. So for today, we're going to talk about demystifying a malware attack. So before I demystify a malware attack, I would first talk about the attack, and then what goes on behind the scenes, and lessons learned for every attack. So since time immemorial, even during the DOS days, where analyzing malware is only like 30 minutes to an hour compared to days, weeks, and months when you analyze malware today. Attacks are always similar. So everybody is under attack. And there are 2 types of attack, opportunistic and targeted. So some of you who are already in the security industry already understand what's the difference between opportunistic and targeted. So when I talk about opportunistic, one person always comes to mind, Oprah. When I was growing up in the Philippines, do we have Oprah in the Philippines during that time? I don't think we have Oprah, we have student canteen and Eat Bulaga. But I think Eat Bulaga is still shown today, Tito Big and Joey. For those in the States, there's every afternoon, I think just before lunchtime, the Oprah Winfrey show would always, they would always give away stuff in the show. So Oprah would say, you get the car, you get the car, you get the car, you get the car. Or you get an iPad, you get an iPad, you get an iPad. It's the same with opportunistic attack. They just spread the seeds of infection, and whoever gets infected are the victims. And sometimes you don't even know your victims. So what usually happens is that you thought you want something, you give out your information, you're happy, but in fact in the background you're already getting infected. And what happens is that the attackers, they're all happy. Because now they have all of these infected machines under their control. And during that time, nobody knows what to call it until somebody coined the term botnet. And it became known as botnet zombies. So that's, oh, I'm a recovering alcoholic, so I don't think this is my business.
We have our security guard, so if you're not wearing your badges, you'll be put into jail.
Yes, a round of applause.
Masarap nga. Naalala ko nung mga nangikan ako nun sa misis ko, ang pinigin sa akin ng magiging father-in-law ay basi. If you're Filipino and you watch telenovela, you get the joke, but if you don't watch telenovela in the Philippines, I'll explain to you what that is later. So targeted attack. Targeted attack is that you try to pinpoint a certain target. It could be a person, or it could be a role, or it could be a small group of people that have access to a network or to a resource that the attackers want to attack. But the thing here is that when it comes to targeted attack, there's certainly effort needed for them to actually victimize a target. So for example, somebody wants to target Mr. Lawrence back there because he's a CEO of their company and they want to prove that they can hack into Mr. Lawrence's company. And assuming Mr. Lawrence is not technically savvy and one of his kids is very active in social media. And the kid would say, party at our place tonight, my dad is out, he's in a conference somewhere, I have no idea where. So if an attacker is already trying to target Mr. Lawrence, and they want to get as much information about him and his whereabouts, that social media post, they can use it against Mr. Lawrence. So what they will do is that they will craft a special email just for him saying, it should be coming from Dax, and it would say, thank you for attending ROOTCON, thank you for being a speaker, we really appreciate it. As a token of our appreciation, here's an executable for you in this email to open. Now, if Mr. Lawrence is not technically savvy, of course he could get victimized. He could just download it or go to a link, execute it, and then he's infected. And then if it's an information stealer, every time he connects his laptop to his network, the malware might move laterally into that network and steal all the information that it can. But let's say he's a little bit technically savvy. So he would say, okay, obviously this is a phishing email. So he wouldn't open it. He could probably solve it himself, or he could send it to his security group in his company. But not all people are technically savvy as Mr. Lawrence. But the hackers, sorry, not the hackers. I just want to explain hackers are not bad. Actually, in the industry, we would differentiate those between hackers and crackers. Hackers are resourceful people. Crackers are resourceful people, but they use their knowledge to gain something for themselves or doing something bad. Actually, the original hacker is MacGyver. He could do any stuff with simple tools that you can see in your everyday household. So let's say he just dropped the email, or the email didn't go through. Most people, especially when I talk with different C-level executives about securing their own, securing themselves, securing the role they're in, most of the time, people would send them letters through the mail. Some people believe letters through the mail. So that letter could be a big brown envelope with lots of certificates, and then inside it would be a USB stick saying the same thing, but instead of the vector being an email, the vector is a postal mail. And then the effect is the same thing. Somebody might use that USB stick, put it in their laptop, and then they get infected. Or they could, there could be a link written in one of the certificates of the letters. Somebody would type that link and then drive-by download to get infected. So the main difference here between an opportunistic and targeted attack is that opportunistic, they just sow the seeds, and then whoever gets infected are their victims. While the targeted attack, it's specifically targeted to a person, a role, or a special group of people. Now, one thing we have to remember, regardless of the attack, the threat infrastructure that supports that attack and the people behind it, they're all the same. The motive is different, but the technology behind that, the one that supports the attack and the people behind those attacks are the same. So let's go behind the scenes. So this is a very common attack infrastructure. So if you boil down all of the attack infrastructure you see every day in your work or what we see every day in our job, these are the most common denominator. So first, it would start with the deployment technology. So deployment technology is something that would have the malware reach the target from the source or from the attacker. Now, it could be an email, it could be a USB stick, it could be a free DVD, or free Blu-ray, or whatever. As long as that malware reaches the target from the source. That's a deployment technology. So the most common nowadays are usually through network. You're in social media, your friends will post something, you click the link, you get infected. Or you get an email, or you click a link in Twitter, and then you get infected. When we were starting out, so now the deployment technology is fast. It's in the speed of light. As Bill Gates would say, everything is now in the speed of light. So when we started, when I started my career, the deployment technology was a 5 1/4" floppy disk. So imagine how the speed when it comes to that, to the speed of the deployment technology today. So most of the time, what is deployed is a malware installer. So in the underground, there are different markets for malware installers. So malware installers, they're not the malware itself, the one that resides on the infected machine, but it's the one that sets up the machine so that the malware can live in that machine. So there are two types of malware installer. We have the dropper and we have the downloader. So a dropper, usually it's bigger in size compared to the downloader because most of the files it needs to set up the malware is already in that executable. While a downloader, what it does is that it doesn't have the malware, but it has in it the information where to get the malware. So think of it this way, if you're downloading software, if you want to install software, usually what you will download, this is legitimate software, and the malware is also software. So when you download something, you download like 300 kilobytes worth of executable. But then when you click on that, it will connect to another resource to download the rest of what you want to install. So that's similar to a malware download. So most of the time, like for this infrastructure, if it's a dropper, it's easy. Execute it and then it will install the malware on the system. But if it's a dropper, it will first check for updates in the malware serving domain. So malware serving domain, it could be an IP, it could be a domain, or any network resource where the malware itself can be downloaded. and usually it can only be accessed by the malware downloader. So there are updates that it will install that update in the system, and the malware will live in the system. So I said earlier, there's a different market for malware installer. That's why when you analyze malware, you will see, oh, it deleted itself. It's very common. It's been happening since the 90s. Like when the first malware installer came out, it would just delete itself. It's because it's trying to protect itself from being analyzed by researchers. And what happens there is that whoever owns that technology can just say in the underground, you know that malware that was installed in this company that was responsible for the theft of hundreds of millions of personal information, that malware was installed by our malware installer. So if you want to use our malware installer, you have to pay us this amount in bitcoins and you can use it in your attack. So malware installer is a separate market and it's a separate executable or function from the malware itself. So let's say it already installed the malware. So what happens is that it will not only install one piece of malware, but it will install different kinds of components. So during the early periods, DOS, Windows 95, Windows 98 XP, most of the malware, they're just one file. So it's just one file, all of the functionalities are in that one file. But nowadays, it's different, it's a package. You get one file for each functionality. The purpose of this is modularity. So if the attackers want to change something, they don't need to change the whole malware itself. They just need to change one module or one part or one component of that malware. Now the most common components are configuration file. Configuration file, it has all of the commands that the malware needs. It could, if this would be used for a DDoS attack, it would contain the target of the DDoS. If this is an information stealing attack, it will contain the drop zone or where to send the stolen information. So everything that you want the malware to do, usually all of that is in the configuration file. And the second component is the attack component. So the attack component is the one that actually identifies what the malware is. If it's a backdoor, usually the attack component would have backdoor capabilities. If it's an information stealing malware, you probably would see there a memory scraper functionality, a key logging functionality, or anything that will steal information. If this was a ransomware, you might see there an encryption capability in the attack component. Another component is a regeneration component. So sometimes I term this as the Horcrux component. So if you're familiar with Harry Potter, if you don't kill all of the Horcrux, it would still he would still be alive, the one that you cannot name. So in the regeneration component, sometimes you think you cleaned the system, but then you left one component, and that component constantly checks the system whether the infection is still going on. If not, it actually acts similar to a downloader, where it checks updates from the malware serving domain, and then it tries to recreate or reinfect the system. So sometimes you are wondering, I've already cleaned the system, but then how come the next day it's still infected? Probably removed some of the components. You probably removed the attack component, the configuration file, but then the rest of the components you weren't able to remove. Another component is the rootkit component. So rootkit, if it has rootkit capabilities, then it's going to be a little bit challenging detecting and getting the sample from the infected system. Bot agent, another component, usually it's the one responsible for communicating to the attackers. So it uses if it uses CNC, if it uses peer-to-peer or whatever, the bot agent is the one that's responsible for communicating with the attackers. So the malware components also checks for updates from time to time. And then if there's an update, they download their update. And during I think early 2000s, outbreak was the norm. And you can easily stop an outbreak once you get the sample. Because you only get one sample, you create a solution for it, and then you stop the outbreak. Now it's totally different, which I will explain later. Even if you get one sample, it doesn't mean that you can stop the attack. It means you only stop that one sample. Because right now, the attackers rotate the malware infection in their system because of this capability. Because of the malware serving domain. It could serve malware in minutes to your system. You can even rotate malware infection in your system. As I mentioned before, the bot agent usually communicates with the command and control. And if it's an information stealing malware, usually it has drop zones. It could be a local hard drive. If it was the early 90s or early 2000s spyware, where you want to spy on your spouse or on your girlfriend, most of the information is stored locally on that. But of course, if you are an attacker, you usually don't have access to their physical machine, so this wouldn't work. So what happened is that they started using email as their drop zone, where they send bits of information of data through email, and then the attackers just reconstruct them on their own end. But then internet became fast, memory became cheaper, computing power was cheaper, so most of the stolen information now goes to the domain drop zone. So it could be a server somewhere in Eastern Europe or somewhere in Asia wherein there are no laws when it comes to stolen data that's being stored on their servers. So here you would notice I named 3 network resources that a malware uses: a domain drop zone, command and control, and malware serving domains. Now in government-sponsored attacks, usually these domains or these network resources are totally separated from each other. So that if somebody tries to take down one domain resource, the other domain resource are still alive. Like somebody would say, we've discovered this attack, we've taken down the CNC. So after they've taken down the CNC, the malware won't have any updated information or updated configuration file, but it would still do its stuff and sends stolen information to the domain drop zone because nobody bothered to determine whether that malware has other domain resources and not just the CNC. Now, for your typical run-of-the-mill attack, if it's a hobbyist or an attacker group trying to make a name of themselves so they could charge more when governments who doesn't like us would like to sponsor them, what they're starting out, usually they only have one domain resource, and that domain serves as their drop zone, their command and control, and also their malware serving domain. So if you're analyzing an attack, you have to be able to identify whether a domain that a malware that touches or a domain that's being used in an attack, you should be able to identify what's the purpose of that domain, and not only say this malware connects to these domains, and then you don't even discuss what that domain is. Alright, so that's the technology. Now, of course, the technology won't run if there's no people behind it. So these are the people that are behind the attack. So usually we have a sponsor. We have government, commercial organization, and commercial organization. Anybody that has a motivation for an attack. And then you have the crime boss. So the crime boss usually is the middleman between the sponsor and the technical owners of the different components of the attack. Now the thing behind here is that most attackers, the one that I will name in the next few slides, some of them they really don't want to communicate with the sponsor. So the crime boss serves as the middleman. But this is, so what I'm discussing here is separation of roles. But in some attacks, there are no middlemen. Usually the sponsor is the one that directly communicates with the other technology owners of the attack infrastructure because they were the ones who built that attack team and they didn't go to somebody to build it for them. So who are the members of the attack team itself? So we have the malware writers. So they're the ones that create the malware itself. So when the industry was young, nobody really taught us how to analyze malware or how things work. I remember we had this two-page paper. It's written by Ice Lion, if you guys are familiar with him. So most of the things that we were learning back then, we were learning from the malware writers because we get their malware sample and then we analyze those malware and then we realize, wow, I didn't know that this was possible. So we learned a lot from the malware writers. I was telling my CEO before, if I retire, I would say I would like to thank the malware writers for giving me a job, for giving me job security. Because as long as they write malware, we will always have job security. There was a time in the 90s where people were saying, I think you guys are the ones writing malware, so you guys would have work. And every time they would ask me where I work, I would give them my Trend Micro business card, and then they would say, what's Trend Micro? And then I remember the first one we have in our business card, it says virus engineer. So it's like saying we engineer virus. And nobody even knows what a virus engineer is. So they changed it to software engineer, but then they don't really do any software engineering. But now things have changed. There's Mr. Robot, so everybody's aware. And everyone's aware of the risks of security. It has gone mainstream. So it's fun. So now you don't even have to give them any business card. If you tell them I'm from Trend Micro, I'm from F-Secure, or I'm from this company, I'm from RSA, they'll already know, oh yeah, you're working in security. I know what you do. So the malware writers before, during that time, what they would do is that they would write malware for you, and then you can use that in that time. But then most of them got caught. Most of them went to prison. Some of them didn't go to prison. So what happens is that instead of them writing customized malware for the crime bosses or for the sponsors, kids started becoming the norm. Anyway, during the DOS days, there were already DIY kits. So DIY kits, you just click buttons or type a command line and then malware will be created. So they leverage that. So if they want, if somebody wants to request from them a certain attack, they would, instead of them writing customized malware, they would give them the kits and then they would sell them the license to access that kit or a license to access a certain feature of the kit. So they don't need to communicate with the malware writers anymore. They would just say, you don't need to know who I am, go to this underground forum or go to this channel. I'll tell you where to get the kit. Once the Bitcoin's cleared, I'll give you the access code for you to access all of those features that you need to access. So they've added another layer of security so that if something goes wrong, nobody would be able to track them. They would be able to track this attack is part of this family which can be created by this kit. So they just tracked the kit, but they didn't track who wrote the kit. So if you Google VCL, and I forgot the other one, before most of the kit writers would have their names there, but now the kits they don't write their names. But you can still track the authors of the malware, but then it would require not only research on our part, but the collaboration with law enforcement agencies. And then, as I mentioned before, we have the deployment providers. So they have the main executable, and sometimes they deliver to spam, drive-by, USB, etc. And most of this, they have 24/7 support. Before it was hard to get a hold of these people, but now you just go to Basebin, and search for malware providers. There are lots of small-time malware writers and deployment providers that put their wares on sale in Facebook. They will give you contact information for you to contact them. So if you're doing research on the underground, that's a good way to start. Just go to Facebook, look for their contact information, get budget from their company, and then engage them. Buy something from them, and then you'll have that kit or that tool, and then you can analyze it. And then of course we have the botnet master. So this is the one that owns the botnets, and they maintain and control it. So most of these people, they're the ones that would send out opportunistic attacks, or they would just spread an infection, and then if you get infected, they become part of their botnet. Now here, when they sell slices of their botnet, it differs in price. If it's coming from the US or from North America or South Korea or any country that has the fastest internet, usually they will charge more. If it's coming from a country that doesn't have that fast internet and people that turn off their machines, then they would usually charge less. So you would notice, when I was growing up in the Philippines, when you're done using your computer, or if you still have a desktop at home, you would turn it off. Then you would turn your modem off. But now, nobody turns off their PCs anymore. So back home, we don't turn off anything. Everything's turned on. The only time it gets rebooted or turns off if there's a power failure or the system itself stops responding. And that's what attackers like. That's what botnet masters like. They want a constant machine that's always on so that they can use it anytime they like. And then you also have the resilience provider. Usually this is the one that provides bulletproof hosting. So there are countries in Eastern Europe and in Asia wherein you could rent rack space or server space, and they really don't care what you put there, even if it's stolen information. They don't care as long as you pay them. Unlike in the Philippines, in the US, and other North American countries, if you put stolen information, stolen data information in your servers, you're liable by law to actually report some of those. Of course, if it's discovered that it's really being used for data theft. So the resilient providers, they're the most important providers when it comes to an attack, because you can take down one of them, but then they'll just turn on that server, and then they'll just turn it on again with a different IP or a different domain, and they're back in business. That's why like now, domains are so cheap. You can buy it for $3 a year. And sometimes they don't even need a year, they just need a day. So most of the domains that we've seen recently, this has been in existence, I think, for the past 15 years or so. Most of them are generated. So they're DGAs, domain generated algorithms. So you only need one out of those generated per day, and then you're good to go. And then we have the botnet operator. So the difference between a botnet master and a botnet operator is that the botnet master, by the way, this is my term. Some of, you might talk to other security experts, they will have their own definition. But the way I differentiate it, the botnet master is the one that owns the whole botnet. A botnet operator just operates a slice of that botnet. It can be somebody who just wants to rent a botnet for 3 days because he wants to DDoS somebody, or he wants to let's say have 1 million tweets using a certain hashtag for marketing purposes. So those are botnet operators. They have credentials but are limited to a slice of the botnet and are usually valid for a certain amount of time. And also we have money mules. So these are people that are victimized because they don't know better. They're just looking for a job. And when you look at the job sites that are popping up here and abroad, they look really legitimate. And then they would send you emails wherein there are fancy names, and then when you visit their website, there are real pictures of their executives, and then there will be pictures of other people that they've employed, and there will be testimonials. So it's easy for them to actually convince somebody to say, hey, you know what, this is work from home. All I need to do is process payment, and my position is financial manager, so it sounds really good. They will even give me a business card. So for every $5,000 that I process, I get to keep $250 easy. They wire the payment to their bank account, and then they wire to somebody else, they get to keep $250 out of it. But then of course, when the anti-money laundering agents track them down, usually the people that go to jail are the money mules. It's also very common where they would receive packages, and then once they receive the package, then they'll be the ones to send it out to whichever country that package has to go to. And like for us, some of us would say, oh, you know what, we could easily spot something like this. But not all of the people are technically savvy like we are, especially the retirees. So most of the people that get victimized by this are retirees or those that have been working in manufacturing industries, wherein some of them lost their jobs because their plant closed. And this is their only way of saying, there's a job there for me that I can take advantage of and earn money. So, I was talking about DIY kits earlier. So it's one of the tools that are being used in an attack. So we have the DIY kits, we have the armoring tools. Armoring tools are tools that encrypt or change the form of malware on disk. And most of the time, these are the ones that are being used by attackers to automate what they're doing. So this is an example of a DIY kit. This one is Zeus. So you just click, and then it would create you a Zeus malware, where you can also configure the configuration file to put the different resources that malware uses, and then you can spread it. There's also one SpyEye. These are old kits, but they're really good examples. And as you can see here at the bottom, it's asking, are you infected by SpyEye? And then if you click that, it would actually clean it for you, and then it would say your system is clean. So the good thing about these kits is that if you want to solve malware that are produced by these kits, you don't need to analyze the malware samples themselves. You just need to analyze the kit. And it will also save you some time, and it will also show you how to clean that malware in the system. But then again, it's easier said than done. It's easy to say, you have to stand up here and say, analyze this, analyze that, but then in reality, it takes a lot of effort. Sometimes it takes days, it takes months. This is why when there's an attack that happened and you've already read it in the media today, it takes 6 months to actually get a full report from one security researcher, from one security vendor. Because sometimes it takes that long to analyze an attack, to have everything you need to understand what that attack is all about. But if you're tasked in analyzing malware, don't spend your time analyzing different malware samples. Just run them in your automated system if you have an automated system. Always spend your time analyzing the tools that the malware attackers use. You will gain more understanding, and you will have more information when it comes to the attack. So the armoring tools, very common. We have UPX GUI. We have another UPX here. We have another here that has additional options. And the good thing about here is that you can play with it, and then you can understand how it does those things, like how does it add the anti-debugger crack on there so you can understand it. And sometimes you would discover that all of the functionalities here, they don't work. But people still buy them in the underground. If they're selling this for $10 a pop, if there's 1,000 people that would buy it, it's $10,000 for them. And of course, even if they complain, hey, this doesn't work, nobody would bother refunding them their money. And sometimes instead of paying bitcoins, especially those they just want to buy this, they even get their credit card numbers. So they get charged $10, they already got money from them, and then the attackers also have their credit card numbers and their information. Because they would put in their credit card information, their name, their address, and then for fun, the attackers would even ask for their birthdays, their mother's middle name, their place of birth, their first pet, their first job, and questions that you would see in authentication using challenge questions. So this concept, all of it, as I said before, when I was discussing the attack infrastructure, it's easy to retain malware from the system because it's easy to create malware. So one of my research in the past brought me to Malware Factory. So this is an automated system that people would just leave, or attackers would just leave in their system, and then it will automatically create malware for you. So if you see at the bottom right, that would be the count of how many malware has been produced. Now here, in most kits that are available today, the ones that's being generated, it's totally different in form when you look at the file itself, and it's totally different when you look at it in memory. So it's hard to determine whether they're from the same kit. For young researchers that are just starting out, they might commit the mistake of saying, this malware is totally different from this malware, totally different from this malware. But in fact, they came from the same kit. And for you to be able to determine that, as I said, it's better to analyze the kit itself instead of the malware samples that are produced by the kit. Especially if it's an old kit, chances are there's already a source code available out there. Because it's a very competitive space. So if they have the code available for download then they won't be able to sell their kits anymore for $5,000. Then the competing kit will be able to leverage that and sell their kits for a higher price. So as I was talking, it already produced 15 malware samples. Take note, this is unique, and not unique because somebody just added a byte at the end, so their hash is totally different. When I say unique, it's unique in form when you look at it on disk, and it's different when you look at it in memory. And this one, it's so malware samples. Sometimes, if you want to protect it more, you add armoring tools to it. One time a client approached me and said, we've just been infected by a very complicated malware. So they always say it's complicated, especially if they've been breached. But then when I looked at the file and analyzed it, it's actually a 10-year-old malware. It's just been masked, or it's just been armored by different tools. That's why it was able to escape different kinds of firewall, endpoint solutions, network solutions. I've actually termed it green malware, made from 100% recycled malware. And because of this, some armoring tools, you just get one old malware sample, you run it through this, and then it will create multiple generations of that malware. Now in the underground, people are actually selling malware per sample. Even if they sell this 1 cent a sample, if you're able to create 1 million samples in a day, look how much money that would be for them. This is what makes it easier for attackers to take malware in the system. So if you get infected, somebody goes in, gets that sample, usually it takes an hour or a couple of hours to solve that malware. But then if the malware takes every 30 minutes, whatever solution you have for that malware and you deploy it in your network, it wouldn't work anymore. Because the attackers have already replaced all of the malware with a different generation of that malware, but still has the same functionality. So that's why it's easier for attackers to rotate malware, because if they can create something like this, a unique one per second, compared to hours of finding a solution for one malware sample, you can see that the attackers are currently winning. By the way, tomorrow is a very good presentation. It's AV dead, so it's going to be very, very interesting. Because some people are already arguing that the malware factory might be an AV killer, but then of course, if you don't understand the threat and you don't understand the different products, it's really hard to argue. So what did you learn from this lesson, from the attack? Hopefully you learned something. So to fully understand the threat, we need to look at the following. We need to look at the target. We need to understand if it's a targeted or opportunistic attack. We need to also understand the infrastructure. And we also need to understand the different roles required to support that infrastructure. Because if you only understand the malware is just one tool. And then you don't understand how the different network infrastructure works that supports it. You can create different solutions for malware, but then that malware is already irrelevant because the malware factory already produced a different malware. Or if you're taking down domains or whatever, but then it's in a bulletproof hosting, and then it takes you months with a court order to take down that domain, and then another one will pop up. It's really, really hard. Sometimes it's a wasted effort. But the sad part is that it's good for marketing. We took this down, we solved this, but in reality, the threat wasn't really stopped. So it is hard. So we collaborate. So conferences like this, like ROOTCON, it's really good to. It's a really good platform for collaboration because you get to talk with different experts in the industry, whether they've been in the industry for a long time or they've been in the industry for a short time. And like for me, I always learn something new every day. And sometimes I think something is correct, but then I will talk to somebody who's been in the industry for only a year, and then I realize what I believed before is really wrong, and what that person is telling me is right. So it's normal, it will happen. If you have a very big ego, you wouldn't learn anything in the industry. So the technology is moving fast, so collaboration is key. I actually, in my team, in our company, we really don't care whether you're a college graduate, whether you're young, whether you're old. If you have the desire to learn and you're interested in malware, you would easily get hired. Because I remember before, when I was in the Philippines, there's so many requirements. You have to have this degree, you have to have that degree, you have to have pleasing personality, at least 5'4" in height, not older than 26 years old. So what I've learned in the industry is that there shouldn't be any limitations. There shouldn't be any limitations in gender, in education. The main thing that's important is that if you have the desire to learn and you have time to do it, then that person will be successful in this industry. And of course, always go to conferences like this, because even if you're in the industry for a long time, you'll never know what you learn when you go to a conference like this. So collaboration to be technical, collaborate with your peers, scientific approach, of course, and knowledge sharing. Like the fun part in this industry, probably you guys don't know it, but most of the experts in the industry worldwide most of them came from the Philippines. Most of them came from Trend Micro. So it's funny because we would go to different conferences in different countries, and then we'll see people that we work with in Trend Micro. They're just wearing different shirts. Probably they're wearing Company X, Company Y, Company Z. And I remember before when Trend Micro was starting, really nobody knows what Trend Micro is. But because of Trend Micro, there's so many experts in the industry today. And it's something to be proud of, especially coming from the Philippines. And the truth is, if you have Trend Micro in your resume, sometimes people don't interview you anymore. Only the sponsorships, the one that's hard. And of course, legal collaboration. Some of you would have technical information about a certain attack, but then law enforcement would have information so that you can attribute those technical components to the actual actors in the attack. So it's important to always collaborate with law enforcement agencies, share evidence with them. And like for us, the more you collaborate with law enforcement agencies, the more you would have access to things, I would say interesting things that would help you understand the attack. Because sometimes you can go to underground channels wherein all of the users in the channels would get arrested if they're found out. But then if you're collaborating with law enforcement agencies, you could have certain, like, let's say, if you see talks there, don't arrest that guy or don't bother tracing that guy because that's a researcher that has a very good reason of investigating that channel or that account. So that's it for me today. Hope you guys learned something new or something old. You can contact me through Twitter. I have a Facebook page, but I haven't updated it for a long time. And you can always add me in LinkedIn. Just tell them, Kabayan, I've seen you in ROOTCON 10, you suck, but still I want to connect with you. So, please do. And thank you again for ROOTCON for inviting me this year. Thank you guys, thank you for this. Oh, by the way, questions? None? Okay. Thank you guys. Thank you.